Usually a game works without a cinematic story. You don't have to frame your gaming experience in a big storyline to make it enjoyable. But I think it's a plus if you do, and the problem is if you manage to frame your gameplay so well in an amazing, exciting and mind-blowing story, it becomes problematic if you suddenly don't. And that can destroy not only the gameplay, but also the whole story itself that has been told so far. The Hitman franchise had a really decent reboot after many years with the World of Assassination Trilogy. IO Interactive started a new era with Hitman, which comes to an end after 5 years with the last game of the trilogy. I'm probably one of the few people who play Hitman not only for the game dynamics, but also for the story. In this trilogy, IO Interactive managed not only to revolutionize the game itself, but also to tell such a good story that it was almost worthy of a movie. But yeah, almost. And why I personally think Hitman 3 ruined everything, even though it's, well, actually a solid game, I'll explain now. A quick disclaimer though, I don't necessarily want to go into detail with the problems that came with the price of Hitman 3, the recent DLCs and the maps, but focus on the story. There are already a lot of videos online that address those issues, which is important because only persistence creates change, but because of that I think the story problem has been a bit lost. I know a lot of people don't play Hitman for the story, but personally Hitman 3 took away my enjoyment of the game with its poor story and, well, maybe some feel the same way. I want to start at the beginning. Even though most people probably know what happened in Hitman 1, it's important to explain why Hitman 1 and 2 worked and Hitman 3 did not. For me it was fascinating how IOI and Square Enix managed to make a game that, even if you've never touched a Hitman game before, introduced you not only to the game dynamics but also to the story with a cleverly crafted beginning. We see a young Diana and a young 47 as they work their way into the ICA program. Just as they are starting out in the world, we are as the player too. I am mentioning this because this part already awakens empathy with the game characters. It's apparent that even the targets get a backstory and aren't just meaningless NPCs, as is often the case with tutorials. They even appear later in the game. All in all, a very clever concept. One can now argue that Hitman 1 has too many videos in which we could have already played. In particular, the mission introductions in which Diana mentions many names and many things that have happened quickly get, well, I don't know, annoying, because you feel being run over a bit. But that's not a deal breaker in my opinion, because the story and game doesn't need you to remember all the names. And that is what good writing is about. To understand the story, you don't need to pick up every little detail. But if you do, you get a rewarding feeling because you dive deeper into the story on your own accord. And that can make you feel proud, but most importantly, it makes you invested. What surprised me in a positive way: the main villain, Lucas Grey, was given a multi-dimensional personality right from the start. He wasn't a flattened character who simply does evil, but seems to be pursuing a goal we don't know yet. His dialogues are tremendously well written. In the end, Hitman 1 is a very well crafted web of missions and stories. No matter where 47 was sent by Diana, it had a deeper meaning. In the end, it comes out that all the targets were connected and that our supposed antagonist isn't an antagonist at all, but a friend of 47's. In a well-shot scene where we get a very emotional story of him and 47, the plot twist is built in at just the right time. Who would have thought that this mysterious, unsympathetic man would suddenly be one of 47's allies? Hitman 1 alone is so good at storytelling that it could have been made into a movie. Luckily, we got cutscenes that had the quality of such movie. With a cliffhanger that there is more to the story than meets the eye, namely 47's past, Hitman 1 ends. And suddenly, this wasn't just a new game in an already established franchise. No, this was a story telling the foundation of the franchise without being a prequel. Things got quite interesting, especially for fans of the series. With Hitman 2, we got a worthy successor. Even though the start of the second game was far less cinematic than the first, this wasn't a bad thing. Without much ado, we were immediately thrown into the story. Due to internal issues and a dramatic split between IOI and Square Enix, cutscenes were gone and we only got images. That's a bit of a shame, as I personally think there's a lot happening in terms of content, especially in Hitman 2, almost more than in Hitman 1. But the pictures serve their purpose, they're in HD and nice to look at. The models are well made and reveal enough so that you can recognize and understand emotions in various situations. The dialogue is once again very well thought out and intelligently delivered. And the voice actors do an enormously good job, like really the casting was just perfect. Little breadcrumbs like dialogues between NPCs are placed throughout the game that give you more information about the story. You get, if you are in the right place at the right time, even more impressions and background information, which not only increases the replay value, but also strengthens the bond to the story. You're not just there to kill someone, you're there to gather information. In Hitman 2, the three parties that play against each other get their own backstory. We have Diana and 47, we have Providence and the Constant, and we have Lucas Grey with Olivia Hall. We get so much information to sympathize with almost everyone. We learn more about Providence and the partners than about Lucas Grey, who he actually is and what he wants. The Shadow Client, introduced as an antagonist at the beginning, gradually takes on the role of a protagonist. But even though so much information is still missing, we stay tuned and start to root for the characters. And why does this work? Because each of these characters has a clear goal that the player understands and can relate to. This is so important because that's what makes the story work. Let me explain. There's Providence, a powerful organization that we didn't know before, but obviously has to do with 47. We learn that there are three families that run the whole thing. Their goal is pretty clear: damage control. Because of the Shadow Client and the ICA, some of Providence's interests have been harmed, so they are now doing everything possible to eliminate the Shadow Client and ultimately Agent 47. Maybe a little flat, but it works. I particularly like the socially critical note here, that the world is run by just one organization of rich sods who have done terrible things to fill their own pockets. We have Diana, 47's voice of reason, which in previous games had always been given a rather subordinate role. Here she suddenly becomes more than a voice, but a person. To establish her as a character, a tragic incident in her family is introduced, the death of her parents. This information is not only sad, but has a deeper meaning. In fact, it is revisited later in the game that 47 was responsible for their death. Hitman 2 ends with exactly this cliffhanger, and you can already smell the drama. As soon as Diana finds out, she certainly won't be so loyal to him anymore. Or at least confront him, right? We see how sad Diana is standing at her family's grave, visiting it after all these years. She cares, which is why we, as players, care as well. Losing your whole family is probably horrible for a lot of people. Her goal in the game so far has been only made clear by the ICA. She's sort of just been pushed back and forth. At the end of the game, however, a goal is created for her. What will she do when she finds out that 47, her longtime friend, is responsible for her family's death? And of course, there's 47. Whose past we kind of know through the old games. Although 47 is an emotionless killer and is rather passively led through the world, we feel for him because we witness live how more and more information comes to light that has to do with his past, which he has mostly forgotten. We want to know what happened to him, we want to know what this organization has to do with it, and we want to know why the Shadow Client, aka Lucas Grey, has such a strong interest in him. 47 doesn't have a clear goal per se at first, but it becomes very clear as Hitman 2 progresses: revenge. Even though this revenge is rather driven by his friend and you don't really get the feeling that 47 puts his heart and soul into it, you can see that he does care. So we learn that 47 can very well feel emotions, albeit subdued. He is no longer this one guy we control who kills people for us. He has become a sentient being who has friends and has a past that has shaped and changed him. So with him, it's not so much a clear goal, but his character development that makes us care. Then there's probably the most important character in this story besides 47, Lucas Grey. He was so cleverly constructed that we've already gone through a lot of emotions with him. In the first game, he was evil, somewhat unsympathetic, as he supposedly acted against the ICA and thus against 47. At the end of Hitman 1, the whole situation turns 180 degrees and we now learn that Lucas Grey is not evil at all, but is even on 47's side. Finally, we also get to know his past along with 47's. That they both grew up together, that Lucas is exactly the opposite of 47 and can remember everything and feel emotions ever since. He is sort of the other side of the coin, a man with PTSD marked by the events but willing to take back his life and destroy Providence once and for all. His goal is crystal clear. He wants revenge and his freedom. Besides his clear goal, we get to see fragments of his personality. He cares about 47 and asks how he is when no one else cares. He's with 47 during missions, even when he's not actively on the map. He knows what 47 has been through and wants to convince him that freedom is an option they can both achieve. Lucas Grey is almost a bit of a contrast to Diana, who has seen and used 47 as an asset for many years. Lucas, on the other hand, wants 47 to become independent and stop allowing himself to be used. He sort of keeps pushing him in this one direction throughout the whole story. That may come across a bit questionable in some situations, but ultimately Lucas Grey is the driving force of both games. He is the reason we traveled the world and killed targets with 47 in the first place. He is the reason we suddenly have the Constant as an enemy and thus Providence breathing down our necks. He's the reason why Hitman 1 and 2 work. When you have a protagonist who feels little to no emotions and has been a very passive participant so far, it's difficult, if not impossible, to get players or viewers to emphasize. To get around this, you create something else that serves as a driving force. IOI has done this very well by putting 47's best friend in their place. In fact, I have to say that Lucas Grey convinced me more than any other character in the game. His views, his desires and goals were understandable. Even if you question some of the practices he used, it was comprehensible that he acted the way he did. After all, he was portrayed as a somewhat disorganized man, constantly looking to do as little collateral damage as possible while still getting the bad guys. He's not perfect, like 47, but has rough edges, and in my opinion, that makes him likable. Hitman 2 ended with a huge cliffhanger. Moreover, hardly any questions were answered, just the opposite. Will the team manage to defeat Providence? Will Lucas and 47 be free in the end? Will Diana be able to forgive 47? Will 47 and Lucas be angry at Diana and Olivia for letting the Constant go? Will Lucas and Diana warm up to each other even though it became clear that Lucas doesn't trust Diana and vice versa? Why didn't Lucas say that he and 47 were responsible for Diana's parents' death in the boat scene? Why did Lucas tell 47 that everything was going according to plan when we fully know that absolutely nothing was going according to plan? Questions upon questions arose, and as Hitman 3 was marketed, they would all be answered in that big showdown. Apart from the fact that Hitman 3 had a very bad start and annoyed many players not only because of the high price, but also because of server problems, at least there were good maps and a good graphic and, well, nothing had really changed since Hitman 2, except for a few gimmicks like rain and better lighting. The story starts without much introduction. We get a question from the last game answered right at the beginning. The fact that the Constant had escaped didn't matter much. Instead of starting with an initial conflict that might have torn the group apart or at least created trust issues, it was simply told that the Constant had disappeared and neither Lucas nor 47 were angry or upset about it. Arguably, the most important man got away just like that. But it didn't matter somehow, so that's why we just move on. So we're in this fancy building at a fancy party. Coincidentally, exactly 2 of the 3 partners who run Providence are there, so we can very conveniently kill them. Lucas is our handler this time, which is pretty cool because he does his job amazingly well. It gets very emotional in the end, which only makes the story and the characters more cohesive. After the mission in Dubai, we get a scene where we get to know Lucas Gray's character even more. He expresses his distrust of Diana because she let the Constant go. Well, so someone is mad that the Constant disappeared after all. And because this is heavily neglected in the rest of the game, I want to emphasize here that this is a logical and understandable reaction to a rather bad situation. He also doesn't like Diana because she is what he refers to as an executive decision maker, which she is, and Lucas past considered, which he remembers quite well. This is a valid point. 47 wants to stay with Diana even though Lucas makes it clear that he doesn't have to. All in all, a believable scene, if not the most believable in the whole game. The interaction between the 2 friends was very well written. After it is heavily implied that Lucas doesn't trust Diana, while 47 will always be loyal to her. Surely this will be built upon later, right? Will Lucas turn his back on Diana as the story progresses? Or will the 2 friends perhaps face each other and 47 will have to choose between Diana and Lucas? Will Lucas perhaps even kill Diana because he sees the mission in danger? What would 47 do? At this point I was so invested that the suspense almost made me rush through the map so I could finally get my answers. In England, we got Providence's last partner on the hook. Questionable why I had to kill the most important people right at the beginning of the game, but I was hoping for more content in the following missions. After all, the Constant was still alive and probably posed the greatest danger. Once again, we get to see a plausible interaction between 47 and Lucas. They talk about the time afterwards and what they would do. We get glimpses of something like hope for the first time. This conversation also intensified the relationship with the characters. Slowly, the feeling crept up that the conflict between the 2 was imminent. 2 such powerful assassins, that could only become dramatic, right? But instead of picking up on the many issues and creating conflict from them, such as the distrust between Lucas and Diana, or the death of Diana's parents, or whatever I just said the last minutes, we suddenly find ourselves in a forest and Lucas kills himself. Like, what? The group's connection through their earpieces is cut off by the Constant, and for some reason only Diana is cut off but not Lucas. Must have been a different frequency, I guess. He is injured and surrounded by soldiers. When 47 reaches the scene, he is verbally hindered by Lucas from helping him. Why? Probably because the script said so. There weren't actually that many soldiers, and knowing 47 and his abilities very well, we know that such a situation might have ended with a few bullet wounds, but probably not fatally. Well, at least not for him. Moreover, the soldiers wanted to take Lucas alive. There was simply no reason why Lucas would put a gun to his head and pull the trigger. The situation was neither hopeless nor horrifying dangerous. The plausibility of the game ends at this very scene. Suddenly, the whole story, as it has been told so far, no longer made sense. Why would the man who carried the last 2 games with his revenge kill himself so close to the finish line when it wasn't even a hopeless situation? Like, don't get me wrong, the situation was dicey and anyone else probably would have surrendered so their friend could survive. but knowing that we have two very dangerous assassins here that faced more threatening situations. The scene was somewhat a joke that isn't funny. Lucas Gray's death was the most senseless I have ever witnessed in a game, considering he was the protagonist and not some NPC or ally that we didn't know much about. It made all the tension that was built up between Diana and him void. All the intimate conversations between him and 47 became void as well. Almost half of all the previous scenes became void because they simply didn't matter anymore. They all had their connection with Lucas Gray, but he was now taken out of the game. If he had been killed in action by Diana or 47, then we would have cared. The previous scenes would have made sense. But what we got was one big nah. When you kill off a main character, it has to be emotional and in line with the suspense you build up. Lucas Gray's death was neither, which is why not only the scene, but all of a sudden the entire game lost tension. On top of that, they combined one pointless scene with another. Probably the most built-up drama, namely the death of Diana's parents, is thrown in just like that. Diana suddenly turned from a very intelligent and sharp woman to something emotionless and passive. She just let herself be kidnapped without any resistance. And here, I don't expect any secret kung fu moves, but like anything more than verbal resistance. In all the other scenes after that, her emotional investment was lacking. How about trying to reach 47 somehow? Try to reach out for Olivia, but no. That would have given the impression that she was still on our side, and they did pull out the old trope. Diana is betraying 47, or is she? It was obvious she was on our side the whole time. The one and only thing that could have caused a loss of trust was the fact that 47 killed her parents. But what did we see of that? Nothing. The folder was slapped in front of her, subtitled so the normal player could understand what was happening, and then bang, to the next scene. We didn't see how Diana reacted at all, so why should we care? Why would this have an impact on the story if we don't see it? The fact that they put two very important twists in one scene was such a bad choice. We don't get time to digest the death of Lucas Gray. We don't get time to witness Diana's anger or disappointment that a long-trusted friend actually is responsible for her parents' death. All the emotional conversations we witnessed throughout the whole trilogy suddenly went missing. And by the way, 2009 called and wants its cutscenes back. No, really, I didn't expect cinematic movie cutscenes like in the first game, knowing that IOI doesn't really have the resources. But damn, even the cutscenes from Assassin's Creed 2 were better. The people had emotions. In Hitman 3, everyone suddenly became 47, emotionless. Except for Lucas, who smiled here and there in a, well, rather creepy manner. Again, I wasn't expecting cinematic cutscenes, but at least scenes worthy of 2021. After all, they charge the price of a AAA game, then I also expect AAA graphics. Whatever, let's move on. The scene was over so fast, I really thought I'd missed something. Suddenly Diana was gone. We don't hear from her for ages, and eventually we see her in Mendoza, collected and cool. Well, you might argue, this is the mysterious part. They wanted us to be oblivious of her true intentions. Okay, fine, that wasn't delivered well, but I take it. But even though 47 is 47 and we know he's a bit emotionally deprived, he is not stupid. Shouldn't he have asked something like,
"Yo, Diana, what took you so long? How you been? I've been worried about you. Has the constant hurt you? What happened?"
But no such conversation takes place at all. For 47, it's clear that Diana was just kidnapped and now she's fine. No one questioned that for a second. Well, except the player. Or just me. I don't know. Since then, it was only 47 that got the story forward. Suddenly, we are back to the old pattern. 47 is sent back and forth. He supposedly wants to continue destroying Providence, but first destroys the ICA because it has been, I don't know, Infiltrated? By whom? When? Did I see that? Who was the rat? Did we kill them? And why did he never tell Diana about it? Like,
Diana, it has destroyed our employee for the last 20 years. I hope you're okay with that.
there is no real indication whether he really wants to kill the Constant or whether he only does it because the script wanted it that way. Emotional dialogues, important key elements, or interactions in general are completely missing. Okay, sometimes you don't have to show things to work out, but let's see, why would 47 want to move on? Does 47 want to kill the Constant because he indirectly killed Lucas Grey? Well, no, not really. The death of his friend doesn't affect him. He just moves on and leaves him to rot in the woods. Does 47 want to kill him because he kidnapped Diana? No, not really, because she turns up in Mendoza as if nothing ever happened, and he doesn't question it either. Does 47 want to kill him so he can finally be free? Well, not really. We never saw that he suffered particularly from the fact that Providence still exists, or that he had any drastic inconveniences in adulthood because of this organization. The idea of freedom belonged to Lucas Grey, not so much to 47. And as he said himself, his past feels like as if it's from someone else. There is no real connection. So why would he care then? What's 47's goal then? Maybe he doesn't need one after all. Up until now, everyone else has decided for him. The fact that 47 was portrayed as so stupid and loyal along the lines of Diana will fix it was actually quite cute, because it showed that 47 was really just a big baby who was good with guns. But on the other hand, they portrayed him as so independent and confident, as if he was a new man, and that just didn't fit the other narrative. You know, if someone can't really show emotions, it would have been important to show the significance of his actions in a different way. And if you can't do that in a convincing way, then other characters come into play, like Lucas or Diana, who, I don't know, need to be saved. All in all, there was no real urgency as to why the characters had to do different things. They just did it because, well, probably the script said so. In the end, 47 just ran around in 3 more missions and killed the Constant at the end. That was the most boring thing ever. Just as underwhelming as Lucas Grey was taken out, the actual antagonist was also taken out rather boringly. I was really hoping for a massive showdown at the Institute where it all started. That would have made sense and would have given the whole story a worthy ending. The only way anything of this makes sense is that either A, the writer of the other 2 games left and took the script with the 3rd game with them, or B, they wanted to finish the game ASAP so they can work on their new cash cow, 007. By hook or by crook, they had to go back to the emotionless killing machine that has no friends and only allows a female voice in his head. Because that's the way it's always been, and people don't change. Even if such change has been built up for 3 games, we let them go and stay the same for another 20 years. And that's not how you end an otherwise mind-blowing trilogy. Even if Hitman 3 is a good game in itself, at the end of the day, somehow it's not. And because I know we will never get a decent DLC that might fix those issues, here is my suggestion for an alternative universe without changing too much of the game. 47 and Lucas leave Dubai and kill Madame Carlyle on her estate. Lucas is attacked, but 47 manages to intervene. We get a great action scene. Meanwhile, Diana is kidnapped by the Constant. Without much dialogue, they just take her, maybe violently. The Constant gets his little personal revenge. He chains Diana up in an uncomfortable dark basement, just as she chained him up in Hitman 2. The two have a conversation about 47 and Lucas Grey. Diana shows clear resistance but quickly quiets down when the Constant shows her the folder, which makes clear that 47 killed her parents. She is shaken and says nothing more. The Constant continues to convince her that he can take this dangerous man and his friend out if she helps him. Diana doesn't officially agree as she did in Hitman 1, but it becomes clear that she wants revenge and the trust is over. Well, or at least it's implied, so the player for once believes that Diana is actually betraying 47. In Berlin, Lucas recovers the fake passports from the club owner when they are surprised by ICA agents. It becomes clear that the ICA has discovered that 47 is now working with the still officially declared terrorist Lucas Gray. Olivia tries to locate Diana but finds no trace of her. Following Berlin, Lucas and 47 fly to Chongqing to figure out how to shut down the ICA, at least, well, for a while. After all, the ICA is such a large organization with presumably a lot of server locations that you don't wipe out an entire organization by destroying one data core. In the end, Olivia does find a trail that leads to Mendoza. Diana has had a cryptic message sent to Olivia asking for 47 to come to Mendoza. In Mendoza, we see 47 and Lucas Gray in fancy suits, watching Diana from further away. Lucas again expresses his distrust of her and makes it clear that she has been away for a while and they don't know where or what happened. 47, loyal as ever, ignores Lucas and walks towards her to get his mission intel. In the end, Lucas gets to know that Diana is planning to double-cross 47 and grabs the sniper rifle to kill Diana. 47 intervenes and stops Lucas, which ends in a small fight where 47 shares some of the poison on his hand on Lucas. Eventually, Diana arrives, poisons both men. 47 wakes up in the Institute, formerly known as the Institute of Human Betterment, where he and Lucas grew up. It is extremely hostile. 47 fights his way alone and naked, of course, through the Institute where he meets the Constant at the end. He has treated Lucas Gray with a serum. He passively threatens Diana with a gun and doesn't seem to recognize 47 or Diana. 47 must now decide who to rescue, Lucas or Diana. Depending on the decision, the Constant kills 47 or 47 kills the Constant. And perhaps, for my soul's sake, there is also the ending that all three survive and only the Constant dies. In the end, Lucas gets an antidote, everyone is happy, but Lucas and Olivia go their separate ways so that 47 and Diana can operate undisturbed again in a future game. The end.